Okay, so here we are ready to do the arms. I'm seeing the caret here. It's looking a little too funky for me, so let's real quickly take a look at that again. I'm going to hover over this line in the middle between the two screens, our two editors. Left click and drag to open that back up. And if we come in here and look at the wave texture, I think I'm going to bring the, let's bring this more over to the center here. I think I'm going to maybe take the scale down a little bit, which means I have to take the number down a little bit. So let's go into, say, I don't know, 3.4. And then let's kick the distortion up just a little more. Something like that. I'm at 9.8. And then let's take the strength of the bump down just a little bit. Maybe. And then let's take a look at it from the side here. All right, that looks a little better. As I said, in the end, we're not really going to see this in the animation very much, but it was kind of driving me crazy. All right, and then let's maybe check the roughness a little bit. Yeah, let's leave the roughness up in the 0.7-ish zone. Okay, cool. All right, so I don't know if I covered it already. If you want to join this screen and this screen, or this editor and this editor, then we can hover over the middle and get this double arrow icon. If we right-click, we get the option to join areas. As soon as we click it, we'll get an arrow, and it's asking us, do we want to join to that side? Or if we come bring our cursor over here, do we want to join to this side? So if I left-click now, it'll join to that side. So for now, let's just leave it in that mode, and then we'll review how to open up our shader editor again. Excuse me if I haven't said it before. I just had the flu not too long ago, so I've still got a little bit of crud, so sorry about the throat clearing. Okay, so let's move on. We're in this whole screen mode, which is awesome for modeling, and we're going to make the arm now. If I remember, any object I add is going to end up right here around the 3D cursor. So let's hit Shift-A, Mesh, Cube, and we'll get this cube. We don't need to do anything to it in this context box down here where it says Add Cube. Remember, we can click it open and do stuff to it, but we don't need to. We're going to leave the cube just how it is. However, I'm going to give myself room over here with my cursor and hit Scale to scale it down. And then we can use GZ, as you'll recall, to bring the cube up. And then, oh, sorry, we should have brought it to shoulder level. And then I'm going to bring it out a little bit. And now that's way too big, so let's scale it again. So remember, give ourselves room, S for scale, and scale it down. Something like that looks pretty good. And I can just use these arrows just to kind of move it around. All right, that looks pretty good. That's about the size we want for our stick at the beginning. Remember, sticks are big at one end and they're small at the other end. All right, so before we start modeling this arm, let's talk about origin points. This dot in the middle of the gizmo, if I click the gizmo off, you'll notice it's still there. And that's because it's actually called the origin point. The origin point is generally when we add these from our menu, it's going to be in the center of the shape or the polygons. But as we model, our origin point might end up somewhere else in our model. If we right-click in object mode, we'll get the object or the option to set origin. And you can see right here I can pick a lot of options. We don't need any of those options right now. So let's, I just wanted you to be aware that this is the origin point. It's going to be on all of our objects. And the reason it's important in this assignment is because this is where the object is going to rotate or pivot around. And since we're going to move this arm in our animation, we want it to pivot around this point. So that's why it's important that it's somewhere right about here. It can be a little bit inside the snowman. You can see we just have, approximately half the cube in, half the cube out, which puts the origin point kind of on the edge somewhere. And it doesn't really matter if it's too precise. Okay, and then I will, of course, need to be able to see this outside face in order to get it easily. Okay, so we're going to start building the arm. If we hit Tab to go into edit mode, and then if you're not in face mode already, remember you can click it right here, or it's number 3 on the top of the keyboard. I'm going to select this arm, and then we can either turn on our gizmo up here or not, or we can simply just go EX and pull it out. We're going to go out somewhere about where we think an elbow would be. I'm going to hover over here, and then we can scale. And then remember, if I want to bring this down, we can hit GZ to bring it down. without the gizmo. I'm going to pan out just a little bit to give ourselves a better view. And then if we hit EX again, we know that's the X direction. And when we get out here, give ourselves a little room, hit S to scale. All right, and then you remember how to push down the Shift key, push our middle mouse button down, and then move the entire scene over to the left by moving our mouse to the left. All right, and then let's get a little better view there. All right, so at this end of the stick, we're just going to have a fork. So let's just extrude this out again on the X, EX, somewhere about there, left click, and then remember to scale with the S key. And then we can hit GZ to bring that down. And then one more time, EX to drag that out. And remember to S and scale. Okay, so we've got our bottom finger here. Now I want to pull this finger towards us, which is on the Y axis right here. We can see that green line. So let's try that. GY, and we'll bring it forward. Okay, all right, that looks pretty good. Now let's do the top fork by coming right in here. Let me see if we can get a little closer here. All right, right in this area, right where the wrist would be on the finger side, we're going to hover there and hit Control R to add an edge loop. So if we left click, we'll drag that up, and then we want to make kind of just a box. So just left click it wherever you like, just kind of a box. And then we're gonna, we should notice by now that anytime we use an edge loop, it kicks us automatically into edge mode. I may have said that already, but that's a good review. So then we're gonna have to click it into face mode. And remember, we can hit 3 at the top of the keyboard. I'm gonna left click here, and then this face is pointed just kind of out in its own direction. Not on the X, Y, or Z. And so if we just simply hit E, it will extrude in the direction of the normals, or basically just extrude in the direction the face is facing. So let's just hit E, and it'll come right out there. You can see it gets its own blue line there that's not on any of the axes. I'm going to hit Scale with the S key, and we'll left click it somewhere right in there. And then I'm going to move this forward along the X axis by hitting G, X. Bring it out about in line with the other joint of this other branch. Now we notice that the face here is at a weird angle, and we want it to basically go straight out that way. So when we rotate that, we can rotate that on the Y axis back there. So if we hit R, Y, we'll get that to point the right way. And then we can left click to end that. Hit S to scale. And then we've been going on the X, so let's put EX. Bring that out just a little bit. I'm going to bring it out just a little further than the other finger. And then, of course, scale, just to make it smaller. All right, I'm going to back out here so we see what we created. Okay, so that's a pretty decent looking arm. It's basically just a very simple forked arm. So let's give it some roundness by adding a subdivision surface modifier. So to add a modifier while we're in edit mode, we have to hit A to make sure that the entire object is selected. It'll all turn yellow. Then we can go down here to the wrench or modifier tab, add modifier, and then we're going to hit a subdivision surface modifier. Okay, and now we can see right here is some roundness. Let me change the view just a little bit. I'll use the sky as the background so we can see a little better what's happening. Okay, so we can see that it kind of rounded it, and that's what the sub D does. It'll come in and try to round any place that's angular. And so we want some of that back. And so we've been learning that if we add edge loops in the strategic place, then we can get some of our shapes back while still having a rounded object. So the first place we're going to do that at is right here before the elbow. So I'm going to hover in the upper arm and hit Control R. And then we're going to left click and let's drag it down towards the elbow. And then we're going to do it right here in the forearm as well. Control R, left click, and then drag it down here. We don't want to get it too close to this elbow joint because then that'll make it really sharp. We're going to do the same thing over here. And from here, I'm just going to kind of show you where to put them, and then you know how to do it by now. So let's just hover in this area, Control R, left click. We'll pull that up kind of close. I'm going to go right here in this area, Control R, left click. We'll just bring it down, not too much. Control R, left click. We'll bring this up just a little bit. And then let's do one down here on this finger. Control R, left click, and we'll bring that kind of close. And one more up here on this other finger. Control R, left click, and let's call that good. Okay, so it looks like our arm's kind of still a little bit low poly. So let's make it a little more rounded by kicking up our sub D. Remember, we can come to this one that says viewport and hit the arrow right next to the 1, and let's make it a 2. Now that rounded it out real nice. It of course also added a bunch of geometry, but I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal for our animation. Okay, and then let's hit Tab to go into object mode, and you can see the facets that are still there. Remember, only in object mode can we right click and hit Shade Smooth. All right, now our arm's looking pretty good. It looks like a stick. Yeah, so okay. All right, now let's duplicate the arm and move it over to the other side. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit Shift D, and we'll know it duplicated because it turns white. And then we're going to left click. And now we have the arm, the duplicate, so to speak, selected. And so now we can go RZ180, and then of course left click to end that. And we can see that the duplicate simply turned 180 degrees over to this other side, and it's the one that's selected. So we don't have our gizmo on again. We're kind of practicing going without the gizmo. And so if we drag it over there, remember that's on the X. So we can hit G, X, and we can bring it over here to this other side. I'm going to hold down Shift and my middle mouse button to drag the whole scene over to this side. And we'll come scrolling in just a little bit. Okay, so that looks pretty good, although it looks exactly like the other arm. And with one big difference is it points the other way. So let's make it point the right way and give it some kind of difference so it doesn't look exactly like the other arm. So we'll zoom in just a little bit. Let's hit Tab to go into edit mode. And then let's do a couple things like, let's go into face mode by left clicking up here. And then I'm going to select all these all the way around just like we've been doing. So I'm going to hold Alt, select that one. And then remember I have to hold down Shift and Alt, and then left click here, and I'll get that one too. I'm going to bring that down on the Z, so that'll be G, Z. Okay, and then maybe we'll take it back on the Y, so G, Y. All right, and then that'll give it a little bit more of a curve the right way. All right, so let's come out here to the front where we can see the front of the fingers, and let's grab both of these, the very front face on the tip of the finger. Remember, I have to hold Shift to select this second one. Left click. And then we're going to move those on the Y. So we're going to move those kind of forward. G, Y. Let's drag those up here just a little bit. Not too much. And we can see that we dragged it. Oh, we got it kind of twisted up there. So let me bring this around where we can see what's going on. All right, so I see what happened. We should go into edge mode, and then we can grab this loop of edges right here by hitting Alt, left click. And then we can move those forward as well, GY. Sometimes that happens. Things get a little weird when you start twisting things around. Okay, so this looks pretty good. I am going to add one piece that'll really make it different. Let's get this right here in the center so we can see this forearm really well. If I hover in this forearm area and hit Control R and then left click, we can move this forward towards the hand. And let's go about right here. And if I hold it in this other part back here in this big space, Control R again, we'll bring that forward, and then we will have made a box. If however we want to, we can slip into face select mode. We'll select that face. And then we're going to extrude this straight up, which is on the Z, as you know. So it looks like this, E, Z, and we'll pop that up. Now I want the top, this face to move towards the hand, and we know that that's on the X. So if we hit G, X, we can move it over like so. And if I want to rotate that, which really doesn't matter, but if I did want to rotate that, we'd know that I'd have to rotate it on the Y. So let's try that. R, Y. Looks pretty good. And then let's scale that down so it's a little smaller. And then we see right here it gets pretty fat. So if we put a edge loop right here to kind of bring back our shape, Control R, left click, and then drag that down something like that. Maybe we can even scale it just a little bit. Then we get this stick kind of coming out. It almost looks like a thumb. Now that makes that arm and the other arm look pretty different. By pulling the elbow down and then making another stick there, now the two arms don't look the same. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We could have given this arm a material first, and then we wouldn't have to give this one a material because it would already have one. But if we hit tab, we can give this arm a material, and then we'll find out how we can give this material to this arm. So, all right, so we need our shader editor back, so let's review how to do that. If we come up here to where it says options, in the space up here, in between the little arrow and the edge of the screen, in the space we'll get this plus sign. When we get that, we can left click and hold, and then drag to the left, and we'll get another window. And remember, this icon up in the upper left of this window is always going to be an editor type picker, basically. If you left click it, you'll be able to pick all the types of editors you have a choice of. The one we want, of course, is called shader editor. And then remember, this N menu is always on by default, so if we hit N, it goes away. Okay, so we have that arm selected, and so now we have the option up here in the object shader editor to hit new. Okay, and then remember, we can always come down here to this one right here that looks like a radiation symbol and left click, and then we'll have more options for our materials. Now, I think I covered it, but maybe not. This right here is exactly the same thing as this principled shader. You can do the basic stuff right out of here. In fact, you could see all of your shaders, all of your nodes in there, but it's just not set up to see it in such a good visual representation as the node editor is. So I like to use the node editor for sure, and then have this open if I need to. Generally, I'll even have the Eevee render engine parameters open, and I won't even have this one open. But there is a bunch of other settings down here that you may need that are not available in the node editor. So just always remember that this is the material settings and our properties, and you can come over here and there's a bunch of extra stuff that you won't be able to access very well in the node editor, if at all. Okay, cool. So let's give this thing an material. So what we're going to do is we're going to excuse me, we're going to give it this arm a color first. We're going to hit Shift A, Converter, Color Ramp. I'm not going to give it any ambient occlusion this time. We're just going to plug a color ramp right into the base color. Let's click this one, this black slider, and then click the color picker for it. Pick up the value shader, take this down into an orangey color, and then let's make it a dark brown color. Okay, and then let's hit the white slider, use its color picker, and then let's come down into the orange again, somewhere a little different. And then let's bring this slider down just a little bit, and then we'll have this dark brown color and this light brown color. Let's pick one more. By hitting this plus sign, we can add a slider. Click on it to make sure that we have its color picker, and then let's give it maybe a different color and maybe a medium brown. All right, so we have three colors there. Okay, so then let's get in close to where we can see what's going on. So here's our arm. I hope you can see it pretty good. I'm going to close this up a little bit so you can see it a little better. Okay, so there's our arm. And right now it all is just mixing these three colors together. So you're saying why we have three colors. Well, when we add this texture by going Shift A and then hitting a texture, and then we're going to hit a wave texture. And then we're going to give ourselves a little bit more room. In fact, we got to scoot this wave texture over, and let's hit Shift A, Converter, Color Ramp right in the middle. And we still got to move it over. I'm not giving myself very much space. And then Shift A to add a vector bump map, or I'm sorry, bump node. All right, so let's take the texture into the factor like we have been before, I think. And then this color into the height, and then this normal into this normal. Okay, and you can see right away we get a little bit better. I'm going to open this up a little more. I think I closed it a little too much. You can see that we have multiple colors kind of coming through a little bit, and we have these bands from the wave texture. And so if we Come in here and change the scale on the wave texture. I'm going to take it up probably to close to 20, somewhere around there. And then if we kick the distortion up quite a bit, and then let's take the detail up to 16, which is where it'll stop, we can see that we kind of get this kind of wood grain, and it looks kind of neat. And then if you don't like the color, I don't know why it does that. It's weird. When you drag those over too far, they disappear. I don't know if it did that in the previous versions or not. Okay, so color ramp, if you want to change it, just hit it up here at the color ramp. And so I think that looks pretty fair. Now, the only reason I added this color ramp, I usually do just to have extra control. If I zoom in here, you take a close look. As I move this black slider, you can see that it changes the whole appearance of it. If I change this white slider, it changes it even more. So putting in a color ramp in between here can sometimes give you interesting control that you didn't have before. So that's the only reason we put this in, just to show. I'm going to leave it like this, so we really didn't need to add it. However, you can see that it can do some cool stuff. And when you're making more complex procedural materials, you'll definitely want to have these color ramps pretty much everywhere. Okay, so I think we're looking pretty good. I'm going to maybe take the strength down just a little bit. Yeah, maybe to 0.6 or 0.7 or something like that. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to close this window up. Remember, I'm not going to close it all the way. I'm just going to close it over here so we still have it and it's easy to get to. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, and then let's learn how to give this material to the other arm. So what we do is we select the arm, and then we have to hold down Shift and left-click the arm that has the material we want on it. Now, this is orange, and this one's yellow. This yellow, as you'll recall, indicates that this is the active object, and we want the active object to be the one with the material we want on it. Then if we make sure we have this material properties open by this radiation-looking one, and then we can come up here where it says Material 04, because we forgot to name it. If we come over here to this little black arrow, there's a plus and a minus. Right below it, there's a little arrow. If we left-click that, then we can select this one right here, Copy Material to Selected. And as you can see, it just copied it right over to the other one. So that's kind of a cool technique to add materials. Generally, it's good practice if you're going to duplicate objects or make a bunch of something, to make one, make its material, and then as you duplicate, they'll all have that material. That's a much more efficient way to do things. But if you have to come back like we just did and add it on later, that's how you do it. Okay, that concludes the arms, and so let's move on to the next step. I'll see you in the next one.